Yeah, dude, this is a tough one. This INP is the value I won't guarantee. So I can more or less guarantee we can get LCP to a certain level. INP,
Yep.
it's like, it's it's kind of your, because the beautiful thing about LCP and why I love site speed at first is you can't really tell me anything about it as a brand owner. Because if it looks the same, like, it's I kind of have free reign. It's not like, oh, make the design like that. Like, it looks the same, it just loads faster. IMP is really difficult because it's a lot of it's business decisions, because it's like analytics, apps, and all these different things. And very often I have to tell people, I'm like, I don't think this is possible with these two apps. Like, I don't get how we do it. So it's like I can consult and I can help, but I always go theme first. So I tell them, these apps are problematic. I flag them first when I start working with someone. And it's, I think you should consider consolidation or, changing now, just have it in the back of your mind. I do everything I can on the theme to kind of like clean around it to give it space. But if we're still not passing, it's like, this is all I can do. And if we want to get further, these are the steps we need to take. But a lot of it is, it's just not having things that you have on the site.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another exciting edition of the Liquid Weekly podcast. I'm your host, Karl Meisterheim, and with me, by popular demand, is my co-host, Taylor Page. Taylor?
Karl? Because popular demand. Who's asking for this? that's I appreciate that. I'm excited to be here as always.
Yes. Remember that survey we took a few weeks ago? There was one person that said, make sure Taylor's there. So
that's yes. I'll take it.
Well, when you have two listeners, that's popular.
That's true. That's true.
Taylor, I have a confession. My wife's alarm clock went off this morning at 6 a.m. and she didn't get out of bed, which is whatever. But I woke up and I couldn't get back to sleep. So I'm dragging a little bit today. And when I don't get enough sleep, Taylor, sometimes I feel kind of slow. Do you ever feel slow or sluggish?
All the time.
It's not so great when you're a human being, but it's terrible when it's your shop. And today we have someone special with us who is the master of mastering all things speed related. Izaac Barratt, head honcho at Baseline Commerce, who's known for site speed optimization, is here to tell us how to overcome our personal challenges and make our Shopify stores super fast. Izaac, welcome to the show.
What an intro, 10-10. Thank you guys. Thank you for having me.
Izaac, one of the things that you know from listening to our many episodes, I'm sure, is that we always begin by having like a hero origin story kind of question. So tell us a little bit about yourself without, getting into the messy details of what happened in the third grade. But how did you become a Shopify developer? What led you down this twisted, dark road?
So I started coding probably around 12. I got into animation. So my dad was around a ton of computers and stuff. Back then you would have magazine subscriptions, and like every month they maybe send you a CD for a software or something like that. So obviously I'm a kid and I'm around all this stuff. I started by using animation software, and at this time on the internet, I don't know if you guys remember Newgrounds and like Armor Games, stuff like that. It was basically, yeah, as a kid, it was the access that we had to computers, it was always like in classes, like IT classes, and you were always just looking, like playing games where people would try to tell you to use spreadsheets. So yeah, using this stuff, I was like, oh, okay, wait, you can turn animations into games. So I tried programming, didn't really work out, and I was like, this is stupid, I'm going to stop. And then I don't know why, 2 years later, I thought I'd give it another go, and it just suddenly started making sense, and I kind of fell in love with it. And then from there, ended up just experimenting. It was originally with like physics engines, because it was like 3D game building, which is kind of a weird place to start. And then as I kind of got older, I had more entrepreneurial friends who were like, dude, we could make people websites. So I kind of had to learn the web side of it, because it's very difficult to sell software and video games as a 17-year-old. So started going into website development. And from there, I ended up getting some jobs at some agencies. But due to the jobs that I got, I went down an e-commerce route. And then in the past few years, I was contracting and working for myself, and I wanted to start offering services as like my own business or whatever. and Shopify just seemed to be the thing everyone was using. And in particular, I didn't want the first people I try and sell to be enterprise clients. So my background was a little bit more on like headless native systems. And I was like, okay, I can't do that. I'm just not equipped to, I have no team. So I was like, let me start with something small. Shopify, it's like everyone can use it, mom and pop stores. And that was kind of my foot in the door, I think. And then from there, I kind of just realized how big and amazing Shopify is. And since then, it's just kind of steamrolled. A bit lengthy, but yeah, I hope that covers the A to Z.
That's awesome.
No, that's everything, man. That's awesome. And that's kind of, I mean, a lot of people kind of start that way to some degree, as far as, like I was doing a whole bunch of other stuff and then I stumble into Shopify and it's like, oh, this is great. And then you find out there's a whole career path in here. So that's really cool that you found that.
Yeah, I'm constantly.
Now, what got you into like focusing on performance?
I'll try to think how to word this. I had a job where someone needed a performance optimization on their website, and every hour I spent on it, I realized how horrible and difficult it was. And because of that, it made me realize this is a real problem. Like I thought it wasn't a thing. People would be like, oh, I can speed up your site. But the people selling this were these like offshore devs, and it felt too scammy to me. And then I tried to do it myself, and I was like, okay, this is real. Like, if you want to do this properly, it takes a lot of work. And for some reason, that it intrigued me. And I went down the rabbit hole on this particular project. And by the end of it, I was like, yeah, this is crazy. And they had a particularly bad site. So the first site I ever did was it will probably be my biggest case study ever, in the sense that their website was so bad, it took 12 seconds to load the page. And that wasn't on like a page speed report. That was on CrUX. So it's like real users experience that.
Well, that wasn't even throttled.
Dude, no, this was legit traffic. And, he was like, I'm just really struggling to convert on ads. I was like, yeah, I wonder. And then we got it down to like 2 seconds, and, conversion rate doubled. They could spend on ads again. And I think that was kind of the wow moment where I was like, oh, this thing, it works.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like having that kind of a moment where you made that big of an impact on somebody, to where it's like, that's wild. Yeah, because like who's going to sit there and wait like that long for something we barely wait for AI to respond that long, right? Like, it's just
right.
That's wild. So that's very cool.
Living with my girlfriend's been great for this as well, because you get to see like way more consumer habits. So like I watch her just be on her phone, and like an ad comes up, she clicks on something, and it's like, if it's slow, I see how quick she loses interest. I'm like, okay, I get it.
It is. I do feel like having like access to people who are not developers, like who actually use this stuff as a real true user, is kind of a bit of a superpower. Like just to observe kind of silently, right? Just to see like, how are you doing this? So my wife also like works now like in our business, and she does a lot of UX, like user experience type stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's been great, but also very humbling for me, because I send stuff to her to like look over before, presenting to the client or whatever. And then she'll be like, this doesn't work. And I was like, no, it does. This is how you do it. She's like, literally nobody but a developer will use it that way. And so it's been very humbling, but it's really good to get that feedback.
I think it's crucial, man. Like even some of the performance stuff that I do, like you'll focus a lot on the numbers, and you look at like LCP, and then there's been times where I've given it to a client who's very untechnical, and they're like, why does it feel slower than this website? And they look at it and it's like, it's an animation, we're actually 2 times as fast. But like the perception is very different. So it's important to get non-technical feedback, because it's most people, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's the real users. And that's a good, I'm sure we can dig into that a little bit too, because I've had plenty of instances where I can show them numbers on our website's faster, but they're like, this feels faster, and perception definitely plays a part to that. So I think that's a really interesting topic. Hopefully we can cover a little bit of that today, because I'm sure there's plenty of other use cases or other gotchas for that. But so when we're talking about performance and where you started with Shopify and kind of like with what you're doing now, I think primarily we're talking about, and we chatted about this a little bit earlier, primarily we're talking about like storefront performance. So like on Shopify themes and stuff like that, but there is a lot of crossover, right? Performance is a pretty broad category that has a lot of techniques you can employ both for app surfaces and everything else or whatever. So as far as like where do you think, if we're starting to talk about performance for Shopify themes, I think one of the reasons I had originally reached out to you, be like, hey, like we need to have you on to talk about this, because a lot of the stuff that you've been posting about as well, like great content on LinkedIn and everything on performance. Just like these nice little graphics on like, here's like the top things you should be focusing on or whatever. Like you're really good at breaking down things into systems and trying to teach people like what to look at, what to focus on, how to move through things. So I don't know if like that's like maybe where you want to start, like when people are actually starting to focus on performance for a storefront or something like that. Where do you start, or what do you typically recommend? Like, how do we start thinking about this? Because it used to be we have to convince clients that this is important, but that's not really as big a deal anymore, right? Like most clients understand like this is important.
For sure. You, okay. So from a client perspective, I would probably always start with stuff like assets, just because it's kind of top of mind for them as well. Like I think everyone instinctually knows if I had a ton of video on my site, it's going to be slower. So simple stuff like just using correct formats, making sure you're not having assets bigger than they need to be. Also because that's like actionable within a day. Like if I tell you this, you can try it out, you can see an improvement, and then you're like, oh dude, like what's next? So it's kind of like a gateway. But if I'm speaking to someone a little bit more,
and what do you tell people? Yeah, I would say going back to like the assets pieces and stuff like that, right? Like proper size and optimization there. So as far as that goes, a lot of the pushback that I'll get from people or other devs even be like, well, Shopify has a very performant like CDN, right? Like it already does the optimization for you. It's like, well, it doesn't. Like if you still give it something that's optimized to some degree, it's going to be better than if you dump something in there that's not at all. Like it feels like people like expect Shopify to completely handle this for them. And so like that's a conversation I've had with people. I don't know if you've had that same back and forth of, people saying that.
I have people do ask. They normally go, "Oh, what's wrong with Shopify CDN?" And I just try to explain like, unless you use it properly, it just doesn't really matter. It's like, Shopify in theory is better than WordPress, but if you got 100 apps on the store, it's going to be slow. So it's however your setup is. But yeah, you're totally right. Like you have to tell Shopify how to do things for it to work.
Yeah, it's not just going to magically fix all the things, if you upload something ridiculous, even if it does meet size limit standards. So, but okay. Yeah. So we're starting with assets. Like you said, that's immediate, actionable, starts right away. First thing that you do. So like, and do you give clients like size recommendations or anything like that for assets? Like we should be shooting for this, like, depending on like where it's at in the layout or anything like that, or whatever, like rules of thumb that you have to follow there.
Interesting. You know what? I normally don't go that far, but I think that's a good idea. I'm probably going to make that as some content. That's a nice idea. I also think it depends.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, sorry. Like, I guess like how in the reads you want to be, because when you run a Google page speed test, and this is the thing that people tend to look at the most, you got the FCP, LCP scores. I don't recommend looking there because I don't think I think it's a bit too harsh for Shopify. But I did some experiments on this because I wanted to get a good score for something I was doing. And I found that to get the LCP to be below, I think it was 3.5, 4 seconds, like I needed the image to be no bigger than 15 kilobytes. Now, I think for most images, that doesn't even make sense. But look, this particular website had quite a plain image. We could compress it. It didn't look too terrible. It did work. And even then, you've got to have the FCP and everything else working well. But I do try and tell people that, where they're like, oh, I want, Google PageSpeed to pass. I'm like, okay, well, make the image 15 kilobytes. And, if you like it, we can maybe talk about it. But, at the speed they throttle it at, the size of like that file size is going to take a second and a half. You can't expect that to fit within 3 seconds. So I think it's definitely a case of finding what you're comfortable with, kind of sacrificing. But yeah, I'd say I actually think 60 and below is cool for mobile, 60 kilobytes. As long as it's not too many images and you're preloading the LCP and everything else. I think that's a cool size. I think most people aren't aware of how much you can compress an
Preloading.
image.
What does that? What does that even mean, right? Like, do people? So you need to cover that too, like preloading. Like that's a strategy people probably don't even know about too, right?
100%. So, okay, what I would tell to the non-technical people is all the asset stuff because it's actionable. To the technical people, I think the two primary concepts that are important is preloading and deferring. And I kind of describe that as just arranging your traffic because we've got a limited bandwidth that we're downloading stuff on. So even if even if you have the smallest files in the world, you're trying to download everything in the first few seconds and it creates a traffic jam. So the aim of the game really is to perception wise preload or prioritize everything visually on screen above the fold and as much as possible defer everything else. Because I've seen this before as well. It's not necessarily that you preload all the necessary assets. The amount of things downloading at once make everything slower. So they're two ends of the same coin. Like you want to start things early, but you also want to give it the space to fill up the bandwidth. So the first thing I look at when I'm checking a site is like, okay, where does everything download and what overlaps? And I don't want overlaps between things that are further down on the page. You've got videos, UGC. We don't want any of that. We want the LCP, maybe some fonts, some styles, and as much as we can push everything else away.
Hey, Shopify app developers, this one's for you. When's the last time you took a real break? You know, the kind where you're not constantly checking your support tickets on your phone every few minutes? Well, there's a team that's making that possible. The Support Heroes. Since 2020, they've helped over 100 Shopify Plus apps across 40 developers, earning their reputation as the leading outsourced customer support service for Shopify apps. Their team works 24/7, 365 days a year to deliver real empathy and real expertise. And they do this so developers can focus on building, growing, or honestly just getting some well-deserved rest. If you feel already stretched thin or tied up in support queries, this is the perfect moment to plan ahead. Let the Support Heroes take support off your plate while you focus on taking your project to the next level. How do you determine when things overlap? Like, what tools do you look at to make that assessment?
I primarily use Chrome DevTools. So it comes out of the box of Chrome. You right click, you hit inspect. Then they've got a tab for performance. You can refresh it, and what's really useful is it ties into CrUX as well. So Google's measuring for websites. They will actually recommend what site speed you should throttle at based on most of your user traffic. So you can kind of emulate what people are seeing. And with that, it gives you like a flame chart and a graph of just everything that's downloading in the process. And from there, you have 80 to 90% of everything you're going to need, to be honest, to understand the problem.
Nice. That's awesome. And so preloading is helpful. Like you said, like we want to try to preload everything that we can in that above the fold, or prioritize that traffic as much as possible. Preloading is a technique for that. And then lazy loading, deferring, whatever you need to do to get the below the fold stuff. So that way all that stuff above the fold loads fast, because that's a majority of what we're getting like dinged on from Google for a lot of this stuff, right? And it's what users seem to see.
For sure.
And so, and when we say like preloading and stuff like that, I think one of the issues that I've seen before, because as soon as people hear preload, they start to preload everything. So that was a good caveat that you made, is like target above the fold stuff, because at a certain point preload actually starts to hurt you if you preload too many things.
Dude,
I don't know if you've seen that before, but I've dropped into jobs where it was like, I think someone read in a performance blog somewhere, you should preload assets, and then it was just
like 100 preloads.
Everything's preloaded. This thing's at a crawl, man.
No, 100%, definitely. Yeah, I've seen that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think that's one of the ironic things, is like every technique I mention that is technical, it actually backfires if you use it wrong, because you can also defer the correct assets, because people you can defer, you can lazy load images, and you'll lazy load your main image. It's like, so now your page is lazy loaded. That's everything. So yeah, it's important to know the caveats.
Yeah, that is the other one of someone heard about like native HTML lazy loading,
yep.
and it's like, hey, this is great or whatever, but then they're lazy loading like your LCP like asset, in which case then like you've effectively completely botched the whole thing that you were trying to fix in the first place. So, um, so are you finding too, has Liquid like improved quite a bit enough too, where I don't know, I've had to do hacks before to get preloading working properly, lazy loading working properly. There's lots of themes that have shipped with their own like lazy loading library, right? Like using JavaScript and
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
yeah,
this or
yeah.
what have you. And so between like HTML spec and like Liquid, have you seen that like progress enough that you can lean more into that than having to like go through a lot of these different hacks that people have used over the years?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think where Liquid has prevented me because
Yeah, and to
my
clarify,
sorry, yeah, my philosophy
yeah,
is
so an
always
example of
that.
that, I'd say I don't know how deep into the weeds you get with Liquid or what have you when you're doing this on themes, but like, you know, like the Liquid tag, for instance, it accepts a preload now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then we also have like sections index as well, like you can target versus before. This used to be confusing, I think, for merchants, but like I would build in basically a way to say this is an above the fold image, and you'd click it and then we wouldn't lazy load that image, you know, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now you can kind of do that a little bit more natively if it's the first section. So that's kind of like an example. Have you like seen that, or are there other tricks as well that you've seen that you can use now instead of, I don't know, everybody reached for JavaScript before, and I feel like we have to do that less and less.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to caveat this by starting. I've been a Shopify developer for an entirety of 2 years. Previously it was all just like
Okay, gotcha.
HTML stuff.
So you've got a lot of the okay, got you.
Well, my philosophy on this, I let me think how to word this. I consider the majority of my work on the web layer. So one of the reasons I actually got into this is because I don't think it's limited by Shopify. I try and basically understand what is the best of the user experience, and by that I mean perception, because of a 5-second page load where everything loads at the same time is not the same as a 5-second page load where the first 2 seconds is only things above the fold. It's the same time, technically, completely different experience. So it's the technical side I'm aiming for, and it's also best understanding browsers so I can work with them, because there's so many optimizations they do under the hood. Sorry, it's like, how can I? Because even sometimes I actually don't like. I can't not Google, obviously, way better engineers than me. But some of the things that a website will try and do on Chrome, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of. But that's the system. So the best thing I can do is try and play their game as best as possible. So I got derailed. What was the question? What was I was charging up for something. There was a point I was going into.
Yeah. No, I was asking about like, yeah, Liquid and HTML spec and stuff has improved enough where, because before, like, everyone's just been trying to basically hack stuff together with JavaScript for like performance reasons, right? But then we just end up writing more JavaScript, which in essence, again, like, is to some degree helpful, but then at a certain point, like, you end up being more hurtful than helpful, kind of type thing.
Yeah. Not 100. Well, so in my experience, Liquid hasn't prevented me doing too many things. I think what's probably the issue is when someone's theme is set up in a way that data doesn't trickle down. So to your example of detecting where a section is in the layout, I've sometimes had to build data flows whereby I can understand in a collection grid, where does this sit, if that makes sense. So I think that it becomes more theme level, because at the Liquid level, I think they give you enough information that you need. So if I'm on a PDP, I know the top 4 images are going to be priority, or the top 2 images, and I can just do that by template. And it's similar for collections. I know the first 4 images, blah, blah, blah. So I've not had too many problems with it, if I'm honest. And I think there's a styles.css where you kind of use like tags and you put style sheet, and then Liquid will bundle all that together. There's some stuff like that I've noticed that I think can be useful, but then can also be a bit hurtful if people use it wrong. So my issues tend to be more how the theme developer has structured as opposed to the Liquid, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Because so like themes to get into the theme store, obviously at the time that they get submitted, they have to go through a pretty rigorous testing process. But then as they get built out and stuff or what have you,
Right.
things change, and performance specs change, just like accessibility specs, all this other stuff or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes, yeah, you're dealing with a theme that maybe hasn't gotten an update because they've customized it. They don't want to do X, Y, and Z to it. So yeah, so that's more so what you're saying when you come into it, like you're starting to prioritize really like how that data is flowing in first. That kind of like changes how you're going to attack that, because you don't work with any one specific theme. In a lot of instances, you're having to jump into like a different theme all the time for a lot of this work.
Yeah. So I never I suppose the type of brands I work with, it's never we're trying to retheme. It's always we've had a retheme. This is a problem. Or like, things are cool. We've just built too much stuff on it. And it's my work tends to always be a cleanup job. So it's never like we should architect it like this. It's like, right, it's how can we remove the speed penalty so it's not fucking up CVR? But we want everything to work for the most part. Yeah. So I think with Liquid, it's just, it's making sure the data is there, because with JavaScript optimizations as well, the problem of this is, try to how to explain it. You already missed the trick a lot with JavaScript because the browser's already doing stuff itself. So if you've got a bunch of images and you say you want it to download at a certain time in the HTML, even if we have JavaScript and we want to block it, the execution is already kind of started on the browser side. So like the closer you can get to the raw HTML hitting the page, there's executions that happen. The better you can clean that up, the better it is for everyone else. Because otherwise, you're using JavaScript to try and stop things. Processes already beginning, and it's like it's difficult.
Yeah. So, and that's, I don't know, like, and I'm not sure, probably should check how much y'all are using like AI for everything, but that's one of the things when I drop into a theme and I'm setting up like a Claude doc or something, like I actually tell it, from a performance perspective, I want it to build HTML and Liquid first,
Mm,
and then CSS native, like when it can, and then finally, like if we can't get it done with this, like then we'll reach for JavaScript, right? Because
100%.
you ideally want to try to like follow that kind of a path, right?
Yep.
I don't know if you have any other like caveats, or like if you've seen anything also be useful, because at least in my experience, like a lot of times I feel like I have to fight with AI when I'm building stuff for clients, and it wants to JavaScript literally everything. And probably just because that's what these models have been trained on a lot of, is JavaScript, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to tell it sometimes, like, stop it, like don't do that. We could do that with CSS. You don't even need JavaScript for this. Or, we're on Shopify, so we can use Liquid to like drop this in or whatever kind of type thing. So I don't know if you've had any success there. I feel like we can't go an episode anymore without talking about AI, like tips and tricks that we're using in or gotchas. Like I said, that's been my experience from a performance perspective of something I have to constantly slap AI's hand, is like, don't use JavaScript for everything. Like, we need to consider performance. I don't know if you found that to be largely the same in what you've been doing.
I think, I do know what you mean. Like, I'll ask it to build something. It's just like this is way more files than we need. Like, this should be like a one file. Like, we should just fit this in something that already works. It tries to spin out like a new module, and I've always hated object-oriented programming. Like, I've always liked functional and just like clean stuff that runs the same every single time. And I remember at first using AI. I can't remember which model it was, but it's like everything was object-oriented. It's like, why would we do that for like something like Shopify? So yeah, I feel your pain.
Yeah, that is that seems to be a thing, huh? So was Carl, you were coming to the rescue for object oriented programming,
Well,
because that's
not necessarily. I was just going to
functional
ask.
programming is more of a JavaScript first thing, I think, and so I know how
No,
you feel
no,
about
no.
that.
So a lot of people that love Ruby, of which I know a few, they tended at some certain times to shift over to Elixir, which is a purely functional programming language. So I love the beauty of functional programming as well, and I really appreciate that in our modern ecosystems, you can use functional paradigms in most languages that we reach for today. Like certainly Ruby, certainly JavaScript, probably not Liquid, maybe PHP. I don't know, but to your point, Isaac, I think functional style the idempotency, the repeatability, all that sort of stuff. It's nice. Have you used
I
Ruby
will
before?
say I haven't. I will also caveat with say I don't think I build particularly complicated things, and that's kind of, I'm very like, make this work on the web. I know there are definitely cases where like object oriented does make sense. It's just, but yeah, no, I've not used Ruby.
That's okay. There's always time.
Yeah, I'm open. Well, I don't know if I'll learn anything else now that
No,
like
that's-
AI does so much. It's like, I don't know. I rarely even, the way I code now has changed a lot from, I don't know. I just do this and then ask it, why have you done it this way? And then I either tell it that's bad or I'm like, okay, give it a try.
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, so we've talked a little bit about like data flow, making sure that you're prioritizing traffic or loading for everything that you need, like between assets and everything above the fold, like deferring what you can as much as possible. When are we? I mean, we talked about like like preloading, and we've talked about deferring. Like when do you use async for anything? Like, for when we're talking about JavaScript, I guess if we're in that space or what have you, kind of take for a performance category.
Yeah. So async is like download in the background, but don't like execute when you're ready. So render blocking scripts are essentially when they stop the HTML from being processed any further, because this is important and makes a ton of sense so this is an example of something the browser does under the hood that we can't really, you can get around it, but we should work to understand how these things happen and optimize. It stops, downloads, then executes, then it continues doing what it's doing. That's terrible for most scripts because we don't need them before the page displays, and you shouldn't be, well, I don't think you should be using scripts to visually update the page. To your earlier point, why can't we use CSS and Liquid to make these things happen? Async is when you say, okay, just don't pause to download it, keep going, and then when it's ready, we'll execute. And then deferred is download in the background, but don't execute until everything else is done. There's an event that fires, which is like, the page has been built, and afterwards it schedules an event, and then all the deferred scripts fire. So subtle difference.
Right. So how do you? Yeah. So like I guess like if we're preloading everything that we can, right, to like hit above the fold. That's simple enough, right? Like okay, like we can do that simple enough, and then if the rule is like we defer everything else, like when do you choose to async? Like when are we hitting that comfortable middle ground?
I rarely async things because I'm a little bit of a Puritan, so it's either like we either need it or we don't. But an example would be stuff like analytics scripts. So it's like we don't want to wait for Google tag to load in, but as soon as it's ready, we'd like to capture the data. That's an example. But yeah, I'm quite.
That makes a lot of sense. We don't want to actually block the render and destroy the user experience, but we also need to capture analytics. We need to capture user data as quickly as possible. So async makes a lot of sense for that. That makes sense. That's good.
I'm on the board for this one though. I always advise people like if you want, how should I explain this? The only data you'd capture is before a bounce, which may or may not happen in the first few seconds. But it's like I feel that's what server side analytics are for. Like I don't think you're capturing real data. Like I don't think people are clicking within 2 seconds. Maybe they are, but even then, I would argue it's like, is that a legit click or is it like a double tap or I don't know. I wonder how valuable that information even is. It's not my job. That's what,
Yeah, that
leave
makes
that to
sense.
the marketing guys.
That's yeah, right. Like, yeah, like if you need that information, the better data is like sales data or whatever, right? Kind of type thing. So, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good way to think about it because I think I've personally struggled with that as well, of trying to figure out like if we do prioritize above the fold and then we're going to defer everything, like async's obviously helpful, but like where does that fit in? So something like analytics, yeah, that's a perfect example of maybe where that fits really, really well. Especially because you're always gonna have people in marketing and everything else that are saying it is the most important, you should put it at the very top and it should load first, and like so same as when you get these 10 megabyte files from designers that say it has to look this good on the website, and you're just like, it can't, we can't load that massive of an image from above the fold. That's not going to happen. So there's always some give and take, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, and I don't know, Karl, you can obviously jump in. I obviously always have questions when it comes to like performance, because this is something that comes up quite a bit on stores.
Your performance is fine, Taylor. You're doing great.
That's yeah, it was, thank you, Karl. That's what I'm here for, just the Karl validation. You know, and so as popular or unpopular as this is, like, you know, I think we can kind of like move into like the other category as far as like we're on the theme, we're in control of some of these things to a degree, right? Like with content, to a degree with like assets and copy and stuff like this or whatever, we can control that to some degree. But then we have to deal with apps, right? Like if you're working on a storefront, and no app developer wants to hear like you should delete apps, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, we need to like, you know, have an honest conversation sometimes with merchants on that. So I don't know. Like I've actually done a couple of calls with people of how do you look at performance and how do you single out apps as like candidates to be removed if they're problematic when it comes to performance. So I don't know, like as far as like tips that you have, like what can app devs do to do that, or what do the conversations look like of how do you walk through a store and figure out what apps are hurting performance, and then the conversations that we're having with merchants on like whether or not we should get rid of this app or replace it.
That's a good question. Okay, I suppose the order of simplicity would probably be to merchants. I just say the less the better. I know you need some of them, but just actually have a look. Do you use them all? Like, are some of them duplicates? Like, one I see a ton, heat map and clarity. They both do the same thing, and you're probably not using either of them. Like, just pick one, shelf the other. You don't even have to delete it. Just turn it off on the theme. And that's, you know, that cleanup itself can sometimes have a massive improvement depending on which apps there are. In terms of looking myself, using the Chrome DevTools thing I said and looking at the waterfall of the performance, you can see a lot about where apps load, how big their files are, how many files they're using. And you can also see INP issues as well, which I think we'll get onto a bit later. But some apps are particularly bad for like animations or updating the browsers you're doing stuff, and they are a little bit more difficult to mitigate. In terms of how I would say this to app developers or merchants, I think it tends to be a conflict of interest. So I don't think I always frame it that it's not that an app is necessarily bad, but an app developer's job is to make that app as performant as possible. So they want this thing to load ASAP. The problem is you've got another 10 apps all trying to do that, and then you've got your theme code. No one has communication with each other. These are all isolated things we're putting together. So it's just too many cooks in the kitchen. So it's not that things are bad. It's that things aren't in the correct place. And this is a bit tricky for app developers because you always develop an app in isolation. Like your test theme won't have 10 other apps on them. And naturally you'll say, well, why should I? Because the other apps are slowing it down. That's the real world. Knowing where your app should actually load, I think, is probably one of the biggest things I see an issue with for app developers. And I think it's ironic because you'd be shooting yourself in the foot in some senses to like completely defer your app for, let's say, a pop-up. You know, it's not going to show for 10 seconds anyway. Why are we loading this initially? But there's also some political stuff as well where apps will go to different merchants and say, look, your app that's currently on your website takes this long to load. There's all these other things. And so sometimes they're getting a little bit of a war where they're trying to prove that their app is performant. But it's like the perfect world would be for each app to actually understand the main content is the most important. The next thing is like, you know, I might be way down the line. I don't need to load initially. I'm being very sparing with the resources, but it's like the prisoner syndrome where it's like that doesn't actually benefit you as an app. Like it makes it easier to have it on the store and it benefits the store, but it's like the interests are a little bit strange. So yeah, I think it's a weird conversation to have. I feel like I went on a tangent. I hope that made sense.
As an app developer, what are some things that you would want me to understand in the way that I approach writing my app that would be helpful in terms of the holistic picture of a shop's speed?
I'd say the first thing is to understand the category of what the app does. So, what is it that the current app that you're building, like where is it useful and how does it feed into conversion or, the user cycle? Sorry, that wasn't rhetorical. But that is, yeah, it's understanding how the user's going to interface with it and where. Because I think pop-ups are a great example just because it's like we literally aren't supposed to see them for 10 seconds, or maybe like PayPal or payment providers. It's like these are always post-interaction. We shouldn't be using these. They shouldn't be the first things that load, because we got to load the header script so that the menu opens when you click it and all the other things. So I think it's maybe being gracious to the user and actually being honest about where it's used. Cart upsells, that's another one, because like I can't see your app until you open the cart, and it's still going to make a big difference for a lot of people. But on a throttled network, a bunch of other apps are firing, and it's like we're loading products and images from a third party server that's we can't even see. It just adds to the bandwidth. And the insidious thing is it doesn't matter on its own. It's the fact that there's 10 other apps doing similar things. So it's weird to test and understand in a vacuum.
Yeah. So, and maybe this is digging too deep, or maybe I'm just ignorant, or maybe it's both. But with the shift in Shopify over the last few years from apps directly plugging assets and resources into the theme to using theme extensions and other ways of sort of better isolating apps, has that improved the situation, or is it still just as bad as it was before?
Oh, that's a great question. Do you know what? I don't think I have enough time in the game to notice that. Like, I've mostly been aware of the whole extensions file path, and that's, yeah, prior to that, I actually couldn't speak on it.
Smart and humble. See, Taylor, he's top notch.
That's right. Well, and if Karl's like ready, because I mean, you touched on this very, very briefly, that I think it would be really cool to talk about, because this is something that like constantly confuses me, is INP. So interaction next paint, like when we're talking about like core web vitals and what have you. I think like the other things, like largest content fill paint, cumulative layout shift, these are other core web vitals, right? That we're getting judged on, or we're getting the score, this rating. And it ties back to like user experience, right? But interaction, like those other ones, like they're relatively simple enough to tackle. Sometimes there's some other stuff happening that makes them problematic, but like usually for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. I feel like INP is the toughest thing to like really track down, figure out what's happening, and tackle. And so, and obviously theme devs, we have to care about this. Same as app devs and everybody, because it's part of this like user experience, right? So I don't know if you want to like talk about, maybe briefly like introduce what INP is, right? And then we can start talking about like what you do in order to like identify problems and how we can like go about fixing them. Because like you said, like this is tied to app interactions and stuff on the themes as well. So I think that would be a great topic to cover too.
For sure. So INP is, it's different to LCP, and the LCP is the load experience. INP is like the entire session. So it's harder to debug and more difficult to fix, because it's, if someone's on your website for 2 minutes, like anything could happen in that time that causes a spike, and it looks crazy. INP is the measurement between when you interact with an element and when the visuals on a screen update. And anything above 200 milliseconds feels like weird to us. It doesn't feel nice. It's caused by a bunch of different things, but I'd say it's the easiest way to think about it is the task. Your JavaScript or the browser is going to have a list of tasks that it needs to execute. And the ideal scenario is the moment we click open the cart opens because it can execute that task. But very often, you click add to cart, Klaviyo fires, TikTok fires, all these analytics events that are saying like, hey, this thing happened. The browser's busy, and then by the time it gets to the open the cart task, it's like 300 milliseconds later, and it feels like, oh, I don't like that. That felt weird. So there's a few different ways to do it, but it is reducing the time between when we schedule a visual action and when it can actually fire. One thing to fit in as well. There was a report that came out in, I believe it was April, from I've forgotten who wrote it, but it was someone actually at Shopify, and they did a report on the link between performance and CVR, which is like, we've never had a report this good before. Google did some stuff, but it was like a limited amount of brands at certain revenue sizes. This has been everything, every niche, every size. For every 34 milliseconds of INP, conversion rate drops 3.5%. And for every 100 milliseconds of LCP, conversion rate drops 3.5%. Yeah, it was pretty nuts. I think it was sites that load in 2.5 seconds roughly convert 30% more than sites at 3.5 seconds. So we haven't had this research before. I'm pretty excited about it. I wanted to get out there. If you're curious about INP, it's worth looking into if you're failing Core Web Vitals.
Yeah, I did just find the article. You shared it, so I just went back
Juicy.
through your post because I was like, I feel like I read this. I feel
Yeah.
So like it's on there. So we'll include it in the show notes so that way people have it in here as
Great
well. Yeah,
article.
that's crazy interesting. Yeah. So as far as we've got resources on this is important, like kind of what it is. So how do you, like you said, it is tougher. It's a lot tougher to debug. It's not nearly as straightforward as some of the other metrics, right?
Right.
Mainly because like there's so many other things that can interplay there. A great example for the add to cart, all these different analytics events that are firing and this, that, and what have you, and it being slow to open like the cart drawer, or like the cart notification or whatever kind of type thing. So how do you go about tracking down issues like when you see like INP spikes or something like this?
Oh, dude, it's tricky. I mean, first you got to figure out, I guess, like, it's session specific in a sense. So we have to recreate on our end what has happened in the session to be able to isolate it, which is kind of difficult. So I start by figuring out which page has the worst INP. You can do this on Shopify, or I actually built a tool to help myself do audits for this, but it pulls a sitemap and runs CrUX data on all the pages. And that's just for me. If someone asks for an opinion, I can see, okay, how many PDPs are failing, So I always find the slowest page first. And then whichever one has the worst INP, I do that performance thing where you right click and go to performance tab. I throw it on my network, I throw it on my CPU, and I just click the hell out of everything and like record it and see what is spiking the INP. Common offenders are menus, changing variants, anything that either fires analytics or has a ton of animation. They're the main things. And I think it's also dependent on which page you're on. If it's PDP, it's almost always interacting with variants. This happens a lot with websites that have a ton of different options. Like, you can change colors, you can change accessories. Like the more items that can fire and update all the liquid and everything going on in the background. And then for collections, it tends to be filter menus. Homepage, could be anything. That's a tricky one.
Yeah. So, well, and like you said, like it's there's a lot of these things too that are maybe sometimes out of our control to some degree, right? Like if it's something like analytics where like they just want to fire an event for absolutely every stupid thing. And so I know like we've got pixels on Shopify, right? Like, and we can even roll our own custom pixels. They have a lot of these events like add to cart and stuff like that or whatever. Is that part of your solve? Do you try to like roll some stuff into pixels, or how do we fix that if that's like the issue?
Yeah, dude, this is a tough one. This INP is the value I won't guarantee. So I can more or less guarantee we can get LCP to a certain level. INP, It's like, it's kind of your... Because the beautiful thing about LCP and why I love site speed at first is you can't really tell me anything about it as a brand owner. Because if it looks the same, like, it's I kind of have free reign. It's not like, oh, make the design like that. Like, it looks the same, it just loads faster. INP is really difficult because it's a lot of it's business decisions, because it's like analytics, apps, and all these different things. And very often I have to tell people, I'm like, I don't think this is possible with these two apps. Like, I don't get how we do it. So it's like I can consult and I can help, but I always go theme first. So I tell them, these apps are problematic. I flag them first when I start working with someone. And it's like, I think you should consider consolidation or, changing now. Just have it in the back of your mind. I do everything I can on the theme to kind of like clean around it to give it space. But if we're still not passing, it's like, this is all I can do. And if we want to get further, these are the steps we need to take. But a lot of it's just not having things that you have on the site.
Okay. Well, I mean, that honestly makes me feel a little bit better hearing you say that, because that is the same
Dude, don't feel
conclusion
bad
that
for
I
me.
sometimes run into of like it. Yeah, it's a business decision, and you kind of have to decide like how important this thing is to you. Because yeah, we're kind of strapped at a certain point on like what we can do to make the theme itself, like as performant as possible. And then when you have these other actors, if we don't have access to the code to like
Right.
where we can, mitigate how often they're firing for every little interaction they're trying to keep track of, or whatever it ends up being. So, I have reached out to app devs too before. So I don't know if you've ever done this, but as well, like I would encourage other people that are doing any kind of performance work, like when you kind of do come to this point where it's like, honestly, this app is causing like a majority of our issues here. If we could clean this up somehow, that'd be great. And some app devs are actually like super open to that. They've responded very positively and been like, yeah, like we actually can fix that, as far as how things are loading or what things we can conditionally turn off and on. So
Right.
not, so I'm sure a bunch of app devs will be mad at me for saying this maybe too, because now they're going to get flooded with emails from other devs being like, hey, like fix this thing. But you should be open to it because, merchants care about this stuff. And so if we're the ones interacting with them face to face, helping them with all their other problems or whatever, not just like this one app problem.
Yeah,
I think app devs should take that kind of feedback seriously.
for sure. I've not really met any app developers that want a bad app. So it's like, I think people, maybe they're busy, but they're always like open to it. I've found like, I've never flagged something to someone and they've told me to. So yeah, it's a start in the right direction.
Yeah, like that's a good point. Like I don't think anybody wants to build a bad app, and not necessarily that, just if you get flagged on a performance issue, like it is a bad app inherently, but I think everybody's building the app store is looking for an edge, right? There's like,
Dude.
I don't know, a bajillion apps in the app store now. So like,
Yeah.
I think if you can, you can take that feedback of like, hey, like, we've got this performance feedback and we're making this as best as possible for merchants. Like literally every one of your merchants is looking for a reason to get rid of it. So, I think it's great if you can get that kind of feedback and take it seriously.
Oh, for sure, man. And I've seen some apps be quite predatory as well, where like they just run page speed reports and it's like, oh, this app is, and they totally fluff the data. Like I've seen some of the reports. I'm like, this is just not. You're judoing the brain of an operator. Like they don't know what's going on, and you're showing them information. It's like it's not accurate. So it's like, yeah, I think it's good to kind of know your own performance stuff so you can kind of claim, like counterclaim. At least I've seen.
Yeah, I mean I think we've come a long way, at least with like the conversations about performance and stuff or whatever too, because I don't know, it used to be problematic where you'd have to worry about apps loading like their own versions of jQuery or whatever, and like then 3 or 4 different apps are loading different versions and they're not checking if there's already a version on the shop and all this other stuff from what have you kind of type thing. You're like, why? Like we've got 4 different versions of jQuery on here. Like this is crazy, So I think it is, at least it's come a long way. So I don't know if that is because of competition or just because now like we know a lot more about performance and how all that stuff works. But I do think it's getting better from an app dev perspective. So I think everybody, like I said, I think everybody can benefit from hearing on how they can make some improvements. So, and as far as I think we're getting up here on the time, Karl, I don't know if there's anything you want to make sure to
Well, that's what I was
cover
going
and
to
talk
say.
about.
Speaking of what's crazy, it's crazy how long we've been talking about this. This sped by. It just went so quick. It's anyway. This has all been really
I
helpful,
respect the
Isaac.
jokes.
I think maybe you want to. Would it be? Thank you. If you want to briefly touch on the article that you've written on LinkedIn, I think Taylor already alluded to it, but for someone that's listening and is looking for some real practical nuts and bolts, what can I do? You're laying out, if I remember correctly, 9 things to look for on your shop when it comes to performance.
Let me.
So tell us a little bit about that and what we can expect on LinkedIn. We'll link to that too.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me.
Yeah, I've actually been experimenting with content formats whereby I'm trying to slam as much, as broad a useful packet of information as I can in like the minimum amount of time. So I kind of just thought, what are the if I had to put all the performance fixes into buckets, like how would I categorize them? And I just gave a list based on what I think is the easiest to implement, because I always try and focus a little bit more on operators or econ managers. And then towards the end of the spectrum, we've got stuff you can tell your devs to do, because I don't expect them to do it. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to put them into buckets so people are aware. But apps is like the first one on the list, just because I think it's so easy to action. If it's the case of turning off an app maybe you don't use, or removing a duplicate.
Sure. You've got another 8 parts coming out.
Oh yeah. Do you want me to go through them now?
No, that was.
No, not necessarily. You just give us a quick, like, hey, if you're looking for some practical help, like, here's where I'm going with this. Pay attention to Izaac on like.
Okay, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. LinkedIn, I post everything I learn, and surprisingly, I'm still learning all the time. Every other project, something new comes up, or maybe like Taylor and I said before, maybe you do a project, it's 2 times faster, and then someone's like, hey, the perception's off. So I've still got a ton to learn, and I'm documenting as it happens. I try and build as much resources as possible. I selfishly build them internally. I build my own tools so I can audit and make these things faster to implement. But then I also open source them as well if I think they're good enough to share with people. So ton of useful content if you're interested in performance, and I'm sure you'll find some use there.
Well, very good. And with that, we will speed off. Oh, Taylor, do you got something?
No, that's great. We will have those links in the show notes. So
of course,
we got y'all.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So you want to talk about Changelog, Taylor? About time for me to get a drink.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you ready for your nap or your tea break here, or you gotta stretch your legs, or okay, so. Everyone else's favorite, according to the survey, but Karl's least favorite section. So I'm sure you saw, and everybody else was like very excited. Next generation events are now available in developer preview. So this is where Shopify is basically just completely overhauling and giving superpowers to webhooks now through events. And very, very cool. So you basically subscribe to exactly the sorts of events and things like that, or exactly to the sorts of updates, events, what have you, that you want. And so, something as simple as, the suggestion was, subscription scope to product at variance at price won't fire on title edits and tag updates, as opposed to now, like you just have this big broad update of like webhooks are like, this got updated and here's all the data. You figure out what's different. Now it's like, just give me what I need. And so this is really cool. They're working on this. And like I said, developer preview. We'll link to the changelog, but also Harshdeep as well. Our buddy, our friend. He's kind of like leading the way for this here. Has a great forum post where they go into a little bit more detail on this, and so they're looking for feedback. At the moment, I think just products and customers are the only surfaces they're covering in this developer preview initially, but they'll eventually roll out more. So. Big one, action required, expiring offline access tokens required for all public apps starting January 1 in 2027. So, this is kind of a big deal for people, right? There's a lot of chatter about this. We'll check to see what this changes. So clarification on this as well. Custom apps and apps created by merchants in their dev dashboard, or the admin, like when Sidekick creates something like this or whatever and dumps it in there, those are not affected. This is more so if you've rolled out like an app or something like this for merchant kind of type thing, and you've got one of these, you're going to have to actually pay attention to this. So again, you got time, but just a heads up for that. I will not go into great detail, Karl, over this, but Shop Minis received a big old update. So they have basically a big old March and April 2026 update with a whole bunch of stuff in here. So if you are building in the Shop Mini space, yeah,
it's a mini update then, not a big update.
It's a not so many update. It's a not so many mini update. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. So if you're building in this space, we heard about nothing but Shop Minis for a while, and there was a lot of chatter about it. I feel like it got quiet, probably because Shopify's building all this other stuff, and so that's just gotten louder. So just to make sure that you stay on top there, check out the changelog for that. has some stuff regarding like consents and stuff like this and what have you kind of type thing. So you want to definitely check that out. Also, a new feature preview that is out. It's customer account. Like they've got some like UI improvements here. Basically, they've got some additional visual updates and layout changes. You can preview the changes currently and those sorts of things as well. So they're just kind of experimenting, it seems like, a little bit here in this area. Feature preview is going to be available till June 12th, which I should have checked to see when this episode is coming out, because we might be nearing that date by the time you're hearing this. So take a look at that, because there's some interesting stuff in here as well, like increased visibility for order action extensions. I thought that was kind of interesting. Makes it a little bit easier for customers to discover and use features you've built, like in orders and stuff. So some cool stuff in there. Another really big one. There's some cool stuff in this changelog, Karl. So I hope this stuff is keeping you awake. You can now build an app home as a UI extension. So before, when we had like extensions only apps, they're deployed to the shop. They just live on the shop for that. Now you can actually build out a little UI without having an app for this. So this is really cool. I'm actually hoping to get into this a little bit today. I have not had the chance to play around with it yet. But very nice that this is now available. I think this will be helpful just to surface something a little bit more than like if you've got some extensions. The UI just isn't in, like checkout, for example, or whatever with like text fields and stuff like that. You can actually roll out a little app home for it. So be sure to check that out. I'm actually looking forward to taking a look at this today. And last, but certainly not least, and a little bit odd, we've got a note about, you can now customize lms.txt, lmsfull.txt, and agents.md files in your Shopify themes. So these are for LLMs and different things like that. Shopify actually rolled this out without an announcement weeks ago. And didn't say anything, and we're only just now getting a changelog as of the 28th. And so a whole bunch of weird stuff. We had a route for LLMs.txt, and all these other things, and now everything is consolidated to just this agents.md file. So you can make those changes. Basically, it's accessible to you in this agents liquid file, but it's pretty much everything's pointing here for that. So these are valid routes. Surprised how long it took Shopify to roll these out. It was weird they didn't say anything when it did roll out several weeks ago, very quietly. And now this is how it's resolved. So kind of interesting. Be sure to check that out because you will actually want to update some of the content in there for your clients. So that's a changelog.
Thank you, Taylor. And I just want to clarify, I do like the changelog. I do appreciate that you put
Isaac,
time
he
into
says
it.
that, but he doesn't mean it.
No, I do. In fact, I was bitten by an issue that I should have caught if I'd paid more attention to the changelog just the other week when they made the transition from managed pricing to apps pricing, and it impacted some of the parameters that were being passed around, broke billing on my app. And then expiring token one that you just pointed out today, I'd also seen that. And I've already migrated to it for my public app because I was having some trouble with tokens anyway. And I like the ability to refresh tokens if you have one that for some reason goes wrong. So that wasn't that hard of a change. So thank you. But now,
Good job, Taylor. Nice.
it is time for everyone's favorite half of the show, the third half of the show, our picks of the week. I will go first just to set the tone. I picked not a food item, although I was very tempted to do so, but I picked another book I've been reading. There's this author, Alan Eckert, that I really like. He writes about the frontier, particularly in the Midwest, which is where I reside here in the United States. And I couldn't get the book I wanted that he'd written, so I got another book by him. It's not written as well, but still very interesting. It's called The Dark Journey, The Tragedy of the Donner Party, if you're familiar at all with this true tale from American history. It is
so
dark.
Not a snack pick, but a kind of a snack pick.
Oh, wow. Too soon. Too soon. Yeah, there is some cannibalism involved in this story. As a parent,
spoilers.
I almost put the book down because, yeah. Well, most people in the U.S. at least, I think, connotate the Donner Party.
Yeah, this is a U.S. thing, Isaac. So.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
That was my snack reference.
I've been finding it hard to read as a parent because I put myself in the situations that these families were in, and there were lots of little kids involved, and I just can't imagine what they went through. So it is a sad and tragic, but also inspiring tale in terms of the heroism that people leapt up to. So if you like true history, check it out. You will be changed forever. Anyway, so that was mine. Isaac, you want to go next?
Nice.
That's actually cool. I've got that up on Amazon, actually. That does look interesting. I found this lovely little resource on LinkedIn. I don't know this person. I just saw the post that was pushed, and he built a tool for estimating page speed impacts before you've actually done them. It's not going to be 100% accurate, but I thought it was a great benchmark tool for people playing around with this stuff. So you can basically run a page speed report. You can download the information, and then he lets you toggle certain scripts and files. So in theory, he's attributing, I guess, like how long things take to download, where they're firing. And by removing assets, can you kind of see how that impacts TBT, LCP, FCP? Again, it's not super accurate. I had to play around, but I think the benefit isn't. It's more just for spitballing ideas and probably useful for Taylor, as you mentioned. It's like, when someone comes to you and it's like, can we remove these things? It's kind of nice to be able to go back and say, assuming we did all of this, like this is the kind of result we can get. It's a little bit easier to benchmark. So yeah, cool resource.
Yeah, this is kind of cool.
Cool.
Yeah, I've never
Thanks,
seen
Isaac.
this before. Great pick.
That's a lot of pressure, Taylor. 2 great picks from 2 great guys.
From two great guys. So my pick is also a book. No cannibalism is involved. Since it's called The Will of the Many. So it's a sci-fi book that my brother actually recommended to me, and I was very concerned because historically his picks for movies have been quite terrible. But he owns a bookshop with his wife, and so his book pick so far has been phenomenal. I've really enjoyed it, and there's apparently a book 2. So I'll be getting that as well. But yeah, The Will of the Many. So it's a sci-fi text if you're interested in that genre.
What's it about?
What's it about?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this.
Did you
obviously
even
sci-fi
read it?
society. That's what's that? Am I
Did you
right?
even
Yeah,
read this?
It is. It's interesting.
I
So
didn't see a link.
I was trying to explain this to my wife. So it's this other. I was like, I need to figure out how to link to their bookshop. They don't have like where you can buy books off of it or whatever.
nice.
So,
Stop stalling, Taylor. Answer the question.
That's
What's the book
so
about?
Well, long story short, basically it is about this guy who survives. He's more of a teenager, I guess, or whatever in this story, but like part of a royal family. They all get, slaughtered by this other group that is just taking over the entire world in this. And so this group or whatever, this nation, they actually have like a hierarchy similar to like the Roman Empire kind of type thing is how I would describe it. But when they take people over and stuff like that, they actually take their will. So the people like cede their will to them and they become more powerful and strong. It's this whole thing and what have you kind of type thing. So there's a class system involved, and this kid now ends up kind of tried to hide from these people because he was part of a royal family that was killed, but he managed to escape. But now he's sucked into this whole conspiracy where these different houses are essentially, or these different branches of government are kind of trying to keep stuff from each other, and potentially like there's this whole like government instability thing going on. So it's really interesting from that perspective. So anyways, I've probably done a terrible job summarizing the information here, but it's very interesting, really great read. Definitely check it out. I think if you like sci-fi, it's a great read.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, thanks for the suggestion.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, gents, I think we've done it. And you, dear listener, have wasted another perfectly good hour you could have spent coding, listening to us yammer on here on the Liquid Weekly podcast. Isaac, thanks so much for joining us. And will we see you at .dev?
I don't know when it is, so probably not. I'm a bit out of the loop.
Yeah,
on
if you
that.
don't know at this point.
Yeah, that's probably
Okay. Well,
Yeah, well, tickets are sold out, so yeah.
Oh, well, there we go. Yeah,
boat has
just
been
missed
missed, sir.
well, never mind then. But the rest of you, some of you, hopefully we'll see you there. And until then, happy hacking.